Hi friend, welcome back to the Creator Spotlight series where we take a deep dive into a creative to learn from their creative journey and draw out lessons that we can apply to our own creative practice. And today we are discussing Keri Hilson. In this video, I'll share 5 lessons that we can all take from her journey, especially around the importance of standing in your power and the cost of dishonoring your creative voice. This conversation will focus on agency, authenticity, and what we can all learn as creatives in a world that is often actively trying to mold us into something that we're not. So let's hop into it. First, I want to set the scene a little bit and talk about Keri's rise to fame. She got started young, and before anyone ever knew her name, she was writing hits for some of the biggest artists in the game, like Britney Spears, Ciara, Usher, and Mary J. Blige. Some could say that she helped to shape the sound of the early 2000s. Then in 2009, she stepped into her own as a solo artist with her debut album, In a Perfect World. And at first, her career was off to a great start. She had the looks, the vocals, and the hits. I mean, you could not go anywhere without hearing Knock You Down or Turning Me On. Those 2 hits stayed in heavy rotation. And it really felt like she was next up, like she was next in line to be the breakout R&B star. But then things shifted with a single verse on the remix to Turning Me On, and this verse was interpreted as a diss towards Beyonce. If you know anything about the Beehive, you know that no artist wants to be on their bad side and wants to appear as going against Queen Bee. And this is the situation Keri found herself in. And almost overnight, it was like the public opinion turned against her. And one moment derailed what seemed like was going to be a meteoric rise. When you look deeper, it wasn't just about the verse. It was about creative agency, pressure, and a moment of misalignment. Let's look a little bit deeper and parse out what we can learn. Like I mentioned, in 2009, a remix of Turning Me On surfaced, featuring a verse that many believed was aimed at Beyonce. And Keri never confirmed the target, and in some interviews, she said it wasn't about Beyonce, but the damage was done. In hindsight, Keri's career pivoted on that one decision, the alleged diss. And here's what I find to be the most heartbreaking part of all of this is that she never wanted to record or release the Turning Me On remix with that verse. She didn't write the verse, and it was not aligned with her creative voice or vision. But people around her suggested that she recorded and really pressured her into doing so, and gave her an ultimatum that, and we'll get into this later on, but like put her in a position where she felt like she had to do what was being asked of her. But in that moment, she ignored her intuition. She knew that it was not aligned with her. She didn't want to do it, but she ignored her intuition and dishonored her creative voice. And that moment taught me this: when you betray your creative instincts, it may open doors, but it can also shake the very foundation of your creative practice. And that verse did not reflect Keri's true voice. And she knew it. She was vocal about it in the moment. But in the end, she didn't stick to what she knew to be true. And it cost her a lot. There was an immediate shift in the public perception of her, a pause in her momentum, and most importantly, a break in her own creative trust and her trust in herself. Creative instincts are sacred. They're how your soul communicates through your work. So if something feels off, take a moment and step back so that you can check in, because your gut may be trying to protect your creativity from something that is not aligned. So if it doesn't feel right, just don't do it. And feel comfortable in not doing it. Trust in your intuition and trust your gut. And if it's really meant to be, if it's really meant to happen, the opportunity will come back up again. And it will come up in a way that feels aligned. So never second guess trusting yourself. Always second guess something that's coming from external sources that feels misaligned, because your gut is never wrong. And it is important to note that in her mid-20s, Keri was new to solo fame. Yes, she had experience in the industry, but being the face of her art was a different kind of pressure and something that she was newly navigating and negotiating. And people think that once you're successful, you've arrived. But that's often when the real identity work begins. That's when you have to reaffirm and hold on tightly to who you are. What Keri's story showed me is that creative agency isn't just about control. It's about self-definition, retaining the power to define who you are. And you have to know who you are before everyone else tries to tell you who to be. If you're still figuring that out, your voice becomes even more important to protect. Another thing I'm taking from Keri's experience is to not give up my power, even when I'm in situations where the power dynamic is not in my favor. And I think that is especially important to retain your power in those types of situations, because if someone is exerting their power over you to make you do something, they're usually doing that to your detriment, and they don't have your best interests in mind. They are not going to protect or take care of you. They are probably trying to advance their own interests and using you as a way to do so. Because no one ever uses power over in a good way. So the best way to protect yourself in those situations is to retain your power and not give it up. So do the thing that you're afraid of. Stand in your power and face whatever it is that they're threatening you with. In Keri's case, she was threatened with her second studio album not coming out. And based off of her most recent press tour, it sounds like if she could do it all over again, she would have kept her power and let the chips fall where they may. Because at the end of the day, the people who forced her to make a decision that went against her authentic voice did not protect her from the fallout from that decision. At the end of the day, she was alone figuring things out. This also reminds me to share that no one can stand in the way of your destiny. So do the thing that scares you if it's authentic, because what is meant for you is going to find you no matter what. And people can threaten you with this, that, and the third, but they cannot take your destiny away. So stand in your power and honor your creative voice. And speaking of authenticity, the public didn't just turn on Keri because of the alleged diss. They turned on her, at least for me, I felt like she wasn't being authentic. It felt like drama for drama's sake. And that clashed with the image that I had and most people had of her. And she mentioned in her most recent interviews how she was wearing a mask and not being authentic to herself and her creative voice. And people noticed and didn't like the mask she was wearing. When you create something that is not in alignment with who you really are, it shows. And while people don't need you to be perfect, they do need to believe what you say and that you are who you're presenting yourself to be. And this taught me to always make art that reflects my truth. If it doesn't, I can't expect people to connect with it. So in order to maintain your authenticity, when you create something, ask yourself, does this feel like me? Is this true for who I am and where I am in my life? That's where the longevity is. That's where the authenticity and the trust is. And it's important to keep people around you who both know who you are, and value your authenticity. Because if she had someone who could have pulled her aside and said, hey, I know you, this is not you, maybe things would have turned out different. So make sure you surround yourself with at least one person who can remind you who you are when you need it. And this whole experience led to Keri pulling back and withdrawing from the public eye. From when her second studio album came out to like just recently, like maybe a couple of weeks ago, she did not release any new music. She was still touring, but she wasn't interviewing, she wasn't putting out new albums. But she didn't disappear. She pulled back. And in that silence, she did the work. She lived, she healed, and now she's sharing her story with more vulnerability and wisdom than ever before. Her recent press tour showed a woman who's still deeply creative and self-aware. She talked about mental health, about learning to forgive herself, and about how painful it was to be misunderstood and to have to wear a mask that didn't reflect who she truly was creatively. And this reminds me that missteps don't define us. Even if we fall off course, we can always come home to ourselves. We can always come home to our creative identity. Recovery is possible, but it starts with grace. And if you don't show yourself grace, no one else will. It also teaches me that when you feel lost or out of touch with your creative identity, the best thing to do is to go within and spend some time relearning yourself and your creative voice. It is okay to take a step back and figure things out. When we look back at everything that she did before the alleged Beyonce diss, Keri's magic was never in being the loudest or the most controversial. Her early albums were full of warmth, honesty, and a subtle strength. There was a quiet conviction in her artistry, a sense that she was creating from within, not just reacting to what was trending. And that's the final lesson. Your voice doesn't have to shout to be powerful. Even though we live in a world that rewards who can be the loudest in the room, who can be the most controversial or the most viral, sometimes the most resonant art comes from softness, from stillness, from places that we are scared to share. So let your voice evolve. Let it whisper before it roars, and honor it, even if no one else fully sees it yet. Even if you yourself don't fully understand it, make sure you are honoring your creative voice. So I want to leave you with a few tips for navigating what it looks like to honor your creative voice and stand in your creative power. Ask yourself regularly, does this feel true to me? Not just smart or strategic, but true and authentic. And you can keep a creative journal or a voice note bank to capture ideas that come from your intuition, not from pressure. Next, be very selective and protective about who you allow into your creative circle. Find mentors, collaborators, and friends who value your voice and who you are and what you stand for creatively, and not just your outputs or what you can do for them. And find people who know who you are as an artist, as a creative, and can remind you when needed. And when you slip up, just pause. Take some time, step back, take a few deep breaths, but don't spiral. Get curious. What threw you off? What lesson is there for you? And it's okay to rest. Rest is not retreat. Silence can be sacred, and sometimes your clearest voice emerges in the stillness. My biggest takeaway from Keri Hilson's story is the importance of creative integrity and staying true to who you are no matter what. And her story is not a cautionary tale. It's a mirror, a reminder of how fragile yet powerful our creative voices are. And she taught me to protect my agency, to trust my instincts, to never chase relevance at the cost of authenticity, and that along this journey, I will make mistakes, but I should always meet myself with compassion and grace. That's all I have for today. But to every creative watching this, your voice matters, your true, authentic voice, and it deserves to be heard. And if you felt like you have strayed away from it, it is never too late to come back and reclaim your creative identity and your creative birthright. And I'm curious, what does staying true to your creative voice mean to you? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your reflections. But until we chat again, be sure to stand in your creative power and honor your creative voice.